All right, welcome. This is the 7.12 video for the 7.12 lesson, The Immigrant Experience. As a young and expanding nation, the United States eagerly received new immigrants to its shores. As the 19th century wore on, however, some immigrants began to meet with a strong nativist reaction by old stock Americans. Opposition to immigration continued to grow throughout the remainder of the century until in 1902, President Theodore Roosevelt recommended that Congress set up a committee to study the matter. The committee's findings might surprise you. Goals for this lesson. Describe common elements of assimilation for most immigrants. Give examples of nativist response to immigration and immigrants. Demonstrate mastery of important knowledge and skills learned in previous lessons. That would be your quiz. Don't forget to go to lesson resources and grab your reading guide and or lesson answer key, and let's begin. We're going to start by reading pages 532 to 537. Reconciling the old world and the new. Immigrants had to reconcile their old world customs and identities with new world values and traditions. Many immigrants were eager to adopt American ways. Abraham Cannon, the editor of a Yiddish newspaper that was the largest foreign language periodical in the country, New York's Jewish Daily Forward, regularly printed the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution on its pages. His newspaper also carried an advice column, the Bittnell Brief, that counseled immigrants on American dress, table manners, and marriage customs. Even as they were eager to embrace their new lives in America, many immigrants were equally eager to preserve their distinct religious, linguistic, and cultural traditions. In so doing, they made the United States a far more diverse country. Immigrant groups were held together not only by strong family and ethnic ties, but also by an extensive network of churches, synagogues, and schools. New York City had 27 synagogues by 1860. Jewish immigrants had also established some 300 schools to teach Hebrew. Immigrants from mostly Catholic countries such as Italy, Ireland, Poland, and Lithuania gathered into thousands of parishes that helped them preserve their ethnic and religious traditions. Between 1860 and 1900, the number of Catholic churches in the United States grew from 2,445 to 10,000. Catholic children attended parish schools that were also segregated by ethnicity. Newcomers in poor urban neighborhoods built thousands of foreign language theaters, ethnic restaurants, fraternal lodges, and immigrant banks that knit together the fabric of their communities. Most immigrant groups had their own newspapers as well. Between 1884 and 1920, 35,000 dailies and weeklies were started in German, Yiddish, French, Chinese, and dozens of other languages. First and second generations. In 1920, the population of the United States was about 105 million. Out of that total, almost 14 million were first-generation Americans. That is, they were people who had been born abroad and immigrated to America. Another 22 million were second-generation Americans. That is, they were the American-born children of at least one immigrant parent. In sum, in 1920, more than one-third of the country's population consisted of first- or second-generation residents. The process of adapting to American ways could create a generation gap within immigrant families. The second generation children usually spoke English from earliest childhood. They dressed in American fashions, followed American sports, and often rejected old world customs about dating and marriage. Their first generation parents, on the other hand, often spoke broken English and clung strongly to old world ways. Japanese Americans developed two distinct words for their immigrant generation: Itzy for Japanese-born immigrants and Nisei for their American-born children. By the 1930s, most Issei were Buddhists, while half the Nisei were Christians. Popular culture addressed and sometimes helped ease tensions between immigrant parents and their native-born children. A popular Broadway comedy in the 1920s, Abby's Irish Rose, told the stories of a young Jewish man who falls in love with an Irish Catholic woman. Over the objections of their families, they get married. The show appealed to immigrant families because it helped them address generational differences in a lighthearted way. And here's just a picture of Russian and German immigrants waving American flags. In 1927, a new technology, the first feature-length talkie, a movie with sound, also looked at tensions between the first and second generation immigrants. In The Jazz Singer, the actor Al Jolson played the part of Jackie Rabinowitz, the American-born son of a Jewish immigrant. Jakey's father is a cantor, a clergyman who sings sacred hymns in synagogue. He expects his boy to follow in his footsteps. Instead, Jakey runs away, changes his name to Jack Robin, and becomes a famous jazz singer. In the film's climatic scene, the cantor is on his deathbed and cannot chant the prayers on Yom Kippur, the most sacred of Jewish holidays. His son, who will continue to pursue his jazz career and who has fallen in love with a non-Jewish woman, returns to the synagogue to substitute for his ailing father. The jazz singer was widely popular among immigrant audiences. In part, the film's success is due to its status as the first feature-length talkie. But the movie also appealed to immigrants because Jakey slash Jack got to have it both ways. He was able to embrace the new world, but still retain close ties to the old. This was a happy ending many immigrants could identify with. Nativist reaction. Let's look at the picture here at the bottom. This 1893 cartoon satires the first-generation immigrants who, now well off and successful, have forgotten their own humble origins, depicted in large shadows, as they resist new immigrants arriving from Eastern and Southern Europe. Here we see they all are prosperous, been in the country for many years, and they forget that their ancestors were, in fact, just like these new people coming off the ships, poor, struggling, trying to make a living. Nativist reaction. During the century of mass immigration, millions of newcomers changed the face of the country and helped build modern America. Boston, the city of the Pilgrim Fathers, became a city run by Irish politicians. The United States became and remains home to more Jews than any other country in the world outside Israel. Farmers from Scandinavia built much of the agricultural empire of the Midwest, and farmers from Italy and Japan did the same in California. Despite these contributions and achievements, the nation remained at odds over immigrants and their place in society. Some parts of the country were ready to receive new immigrants. For example, states seeking to boost their population, and thus their political and economic power, published pamphlets with titles like Colorado, a statement of facts, which suggested that the poor should come to Colorado because there they can by industry and frugality better their condition. The South tried to attract immigrants as a source of cheap labor. But immigrants also met with strong reaction from nativists, those who believed in the superiority of native-born Americans and their traditions. Sometimes nativist prejudice was rooted in religious differences. When the Germans and Irish began landing in American shores in the 1820s and 1830s, some Protestants loudly complained that these Catholic newcomers held religious beliefs incompatible with the democratic country. Later in the 19th century, Jews fleeing anti-Semitism in Russia would encounter similar prejudice in America. Anti-immigrant prejudice also drew on Americans' history of racism. Since 1790, Congress had decreed that free white persons were eligible to become citizens. But in the late 1800s, some nativists argued that new immigrants, even those from Europe, did not qualify as white. For example, because many Irish immigrants in the North performed the same menial jobs as free blacks, and because they were generally poor, some native-born Americans were unwilling to see the Irish as white. In 1851, Harper's Weekly, a leading political and literary magazine, described the typical Irish face as distinctly marked by the black tint of the skin. Southern and Eastern Europeans who arrived in the late 19th century seemed just as racially suspect to the nativist eyes. As immigration made the United States more ethnically and religiously diverse, nativist hostilities grew more intense and widespread. In 1887, anti-Catholic activists founded the American Protective Association, which claimed 2 million members within a few years. In 1894, a group of recent college graduates started the Immigration Restriction League, intended, as one member explained, to keep the United States peopled by British, German, and Scandinavian stock, historically free, energetic, progressive, and not by Slav, Latin, and Asiatic races historically downtrodden and stagnant. By Asiatic, they meant Jewish. Nativism in the law. Back in 1790, Congress had passed the first law concerning immigration. It said that free white persons who had been in the country for 2 years could be naturalized, made into citizens. A second law in 1795 increased the period of residency to 5 years. The words free white persons were originally intended to keep slaves from applying for citizenship, but they later served to prevent Native Americans and Asians from getting full citizenship rights as well. After passing these two laws, the federal government kept a hands-off attitude toward immigration for decades. In 1868, the 14th Amendment to the Constitution was ratified. It stated that all persons born or naturalized in the United States are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. The amendment's purpose was to assure citizenship for the former slaves, but it also had the effect of making citizens of children born to immigrants to the United States, even if the parents were not naturalized. This law proved an unexpected help to the American-born children of Chinese immigrants. Though their foreign-born parents could not be naturalized, the children were automatically granted citizenship. In the 1870s, however, anti-immigration passions flared against the Chinese. Nativists saw the Chinese arriving in California as an inferior, non-Christian race whose willingness to work hard for very low pay would put real Americans out of jobs. Nativist mobs drew the Chinese workers from mining towns. In San Francisco, new immigrants were bullied from the docks to Chinatown by thugs who threw fruit at them or even beat them. Anti-Chinese feeling grew so widespread that in 1882 Congress passed the Chinese Exclusion Act, which in effect barred any additional Chinese immigrants from the United States. By 1907, opposition to immigration had grown so intense that President Theodore Roosevelt recommended that Congress set up a committee to study the matter. The result was a 9-person panel led by Senator William P. Dillingham of Vermont. 3 years later, the Dillingham Commission issued its final report. The Commission observed that before the 1880s, most immigrants had come from England, Ireland, Germany, and Scandinavia. They traveled from the most progressive sections of Europe for the purpose of making themselves homes in the New World. Since then, most immigrants were from what the report labeled less progressive and advanced countries of Southern and Eastern Europe. The report claimed that these new immigrants were as a class far less intelligent than the old. The Commission asked whether there may not be certain races that are inferior to other races, or whether some may be better fitted for American citizenship than others. The Dillingham Commission's report helped prepare public opinion to support new laws in 1921 and 1924 that sharply restricted the number of European immigrants. The new law set up quotas that favored immigrants from Northern European countries such as England over those from Southern and Eastern European countries such as Italy, Greece, Poland, and Russia. The 1921 law said that no more than 357,000 immigrants would be allowed per year, and the 1924 law halved that number. For the time being, except for the specific nationalities favored by the laws, the door to America was slammed shut. The New Colossus. In 1886, the Statue of Liberty was unveiled in New York Harbor. A gift from France, it was intended to represent friendship between France and America. While the statue was still being built, a Jewish New Yorker named Emma Lazarus wrote a poem about immigration which included these stirring lines. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free, the wretched refuse of your teeming shore. Send these, the homeless, tempest-tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door. In 1902, Emma Lazarus' poem, The New Colossus, was engraved in bronze and attached to the base of the Statue of Liberty. It was only fitting that the monument that greeted millions of newcomers in New York Harbor should bear her words, for America had become a nation of immigrants. A nation that had a population of less than 10 million in 1820 took in 36 million immigrants over the course of the next 100 years. For Emma Lazarus, to enter the United States was to pass through a golden door to hope and opportunity. Many immigrants found their hopes tested as they struggled in the hardest jobs available or nativist resistance. Many gave up on America and returned to where they had come from. But most survived and many ultimately prospered. Their descendants are most of us today. And a picture of a Statue of Liberty. Moving on to the next page. America as a melting pot. The coming together of many nationalities in one nation is an important theme in American history. As early as 1792, a French author, Hector St. John Crèvecoeur, described the strange mixture in which you will find in no other country, in which individuals of all nations are melted into a new race of men. Ralph Waldo Emerson called the United States a smelting pot. In 1893, the historian Frederick Jackson Turner compared the American frontier to a crucible, a vessel in which substances such as metals are heated and melted. It was in 1908, however, that Israel Zangwill, a Jewish writer in England, coined the precise phrase that has since become a popular and permanent part of the language, a melting pot. Zangwill's The Melting Pot, a play about immigrants in America, became a Broadway hit. The play borrowed themes from Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. In Zangwill's drama, two immigrants from Russia fall in love. One is Jewish, the other is Christian. Unlike Shakespeare's tragedy, however, Zangwill's play has a happy ending as the lovers overcome the opposition of their families and other obstacles. The play ends with them staying together at the Statue of Liberty, predicting that many different peoples who have come to America will ultimately unite. The play's title, The Melting Pot, expressed the hope and belief that in America various ethnicities and races be forged into a new identity, the American. The metaphor of the melting pot proved immensely popular. President Theodore Roosevelt, to whom Zangwill dedicated his play, later wrote, "We are Americans and nothing else. We are the true children of the crucible. We are a melting pot of the